So what are combat stress responses? And I'm a big fan of color coding, as you will notice throughout. Expected, normal reactions to combat experiences. We are not made to go to war. As much as we've done it throughout our history, we are not made to go to war. We are not made to kill people. If we were, we wouldn't need so much training in order to do it well. So combat experience, by definition, is a stress, no matter how much direct combat you actually experience. The more direct your exposure, the more intense your exposure, the worse it can get. But any kind of combat experience is stressful, and we have expected reactions to it. Stress injuries occur when those experiences are intense, cumulative, such as multiple deployments, or very long deployments, 12 to 15-month deployments, or meaningful. You know, hearing about how many Marines died that day is different from knowing your best friend died that day. Those types of meaningful experiences hit home and hit deeper than others. These may result in the stress injuries. PTSD is a set of uncontrollable, you can't make it go away just by wishing, lasting anxiety reactions following a traumatic experience, maybe more than one. It can overwhelm a person's coping abilities, meaning they simply can't cope. It's not that they don't want to, it's not that they're not trying hard enough, they simply can't because of an illness. PTSD can be diagnosed when this happens, this overwhelming of coping strategies, emotions, and behavior. If it happens frequently and it causes problems in daily living, that's when we look to diagnose PTSD. People are having symptoms, and we'll go over these in a minute, but symptoms such as nightmares, flashbacks, avoidance of talking about combat, watching the news, watching movies. But this doesn't interfere with their life. They're sporadic, they're not real intense, they're mild symptoms. That may not be PTSD. We look at when it interferes, when it is uncontrollable to the point where someone is really suffering, and their relationships, their life, their job, those things are suffering. That's when we diagnose. Now, another important change to Navy and Marine Corps doctrine that you need to know is that stress can come from 4 different places. We used to look at traumatic events. You know, something happens. Someone gets killed, someone gets blown up, someone gets injured. That could be a traumatic event. We now know that that's not the only cause. Think of the deployments that we now go on. We are an all-volunteer force, which means we are deploying more and more often, repeated times. People are now on their 5th, 6th, 7th deployments to Iraq or Afghanistan. If you add in Desert Storm, you add in Bosnia, Somalia, all of those places, we have people who have deployed 15 times in their career. Trauma is cumulative. It adds up. So the wear and tear of multiple deployments, of day in and day out combat operations on a single deployment, that can lead to a stress injury, to a traumatic stress injury. So just because someone is, say, behind the wire on their current deployment, but they were, outside doing patrols on their previous deployment, or someone's behind the wire their whole combat experience, that doesn't mean they can't be traumatized. I mean, behind the wire in Iraq or Afghanistan is not exactly a safe place, right? People still try and kill us. Loss can cause a traumatic injury, particularly, and this is pretty frequent with loss, when it's unexpected, when it's very meaningful, when it's overwhelming in number. It's not just one person, it's half your platoon. That makes a big difference. That can cause a traumatic stress injury that can be beyond normal grief. And finally, and this is an important thing, inner conflicts, things we're now calling moral injuries, can be a source of traumatic stress, and they often make things worse. And these conflicts are things like We were given orders to shoot into a crowd. And we knew there were civilians in there, but we had to do it anyway. Or, we know the rules of the road. You know, you're in Iraq or Afghanistan on a convoy. We own the road. You don't stop. You protect the convoy. You protect your mission. Little kid runs out in front of you and you run them down. You did exactly the right thing, but how do you live with that? How do you make that okay in your own minds? Or, you do everything you're supposed to do in combat, and you come home and you get a DUI, and your command throws you under the bus. Throws the book at you, you are screwed up, you messed up, we don't want to have anything to do with you. Those things are moral injuries. They make you just ask, how can this happen? Those things are damaging.